The gods are fucking you, you find a way to fuck them back.
The statues of children embrace like roses. They're roaming their own rhythmical dreams. Possession is the medicine, the tainted blood within. Nine up on better souls, immaculate postures. Possession is the medicine for a tainted workplace. Imprisoned in mind, turning light to the title. Making it time, turning its presence. The invisible presence and its toxic terrors. The clocks and multitude to the sound of the howling through. Unholy blood possession. Unholy blood possession. Fumes on the horizon of the stainless blood. Gassing up ghosts of night of fires. Our presence on the ground, walk with me now. Possession is the medicine. All you want, the fanatics is out. Renegades we worship within. Nefarious rounds of all omens. The overpowering will. Just tell the sin of you in the sound. The illusion of the house. You're too deep to turn back now. We're full of hate till the medicine go down. Possession is the medicine. Possession is the medicine. Possession is the medicine. Possession is the medicine. Possession is the medicine.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, I'm Andy, also known as Aort from CODE.
And how would you describe the music of CODE?
I would say it's we probably need to make up a category maybe, but something approaching progressive black metal, I would say. Something like that. That's as close a link as I think I could find.
And how do you feel about the term progressive?
It's kind of got misused in lots of ways, and even I'm guilty of using it myself. If you think back to the 70s, it was progressive. It's progressing from what the traditional hard rock way of thinking was, and expanding it in all different directions, whether that's jazz or symphonic or all sorts of things. And for a long time, it was used as a reference back to a particular time. So if you think of progressive music, lots of times you think of, late 60s, early 70s rock and how that particular style of music works. But if you think about it now, it also can be not just a backwards looking thing, but also a forwards looking thing. So in terms of our music, I would say that it sort of definitely stretches what you would be able to class as black metal. And I think many people would probably argue that it isn't black metal because doesn't fit in those rigid structures. But yeah, pushing boundaries and not repeating yourself, I think they're the two main things we're looking at.
Progressive originally referred to a kind of mindset, and then it kind of evolved as a term to refer to a sound. In a lot of ways, black metal was very similar. To you, what does black metal mean? What makes a band black metal?
I don't necessarily subscribe to that black metal needs to be music. As long as it's about Satan, you can start calling it black metal. That sort of things has never really interested me too much, mainly because lyrics aren't something I spend much time on. It's much more to me of a broad emotive feeling that you get from the music, which you can get that same kind of dark and mysterious vibe from things all the way from Beherit, or that basic blasphemy side, all the way through to back in the early 90s, things like Master's Hammer and Necromantia. They were still black metal, but wildly different musical styles if you listen to it objectively, but they had that common sort of coldness and darkness to the music. And I think as long as you retain that, and that distinct type of coldness and darkness that is linked with black metal, you can do things around the borders and still fall into that genre. To my ears anyway, I know lots of people may disagree with that, but I still think at its essence, CODE is rooted in black metal, even though you might not be able to say that we are a traditional black metal band by any stretch.
Now, that coldness and darkness that you described, is that something you aspire to in your music and try to hold on to?
It's not necessarily something that we aspire to. It's something which comes quite naturally. That's the kind of music which has always really, really appealed to me since when we right back to when we started making music. That element was something which latched onto me, and when I play, more often than not, that's what comes out. I can't write a happy, cheery tune to save my life. So yeah, it's almost like a natural reaction rather than something I'm consciously striving for.
Tell me a little bit about how you formed CODE and what your goals were initially, because this was a solo project that you had, right? As Seasonal CODE?
Yeah, it was. There was. Yeah, that was born out of a necessity, really, because where I grew up in England, I wasn't living in London. I was about 50 minutes from London, but it was a small enough town where there was no one else I knew that was into this kind of music in the immediate area either in those times, in the early 90s and the 90s in general. So that, along with the fact that your ability to create music on computer software rather than those 4-track things was just starting to happen. So that sort of meant that at last I had a chance to actually create music on my own and being the master of my own destiny, as it were. So I beavered away at that for 3 demos worth of material. And if I'm being honest, none of it was particularly awe-inspiring, but it was a learning process. And what that did do is got me in touch with Matt, our original vocalist, and he obviously heard something in it, and I liked what he was doing at that time too. So we sort of joined forces and decided that we wanted to create a musical entity that was we kind of felt was missing at that time. So something which paid a lot of reverence to the past, but was moving it forward in a direction which we felt kind of stopped in the latter half of that early 90s scene. So if you think about bands like, I think the Björn's Ender is a very key example there, that demo and the work they were doing was sort of pushing black metal in a certain direction, which I think we both really latched onto, but nothing went on. Nothing really happened from there. Things splintered in different directions. So we kind of wanted to hold some of that strangeness and that traditional black metal and make something which we felt was we wanted to listen to, and we weren't hearing anywhere else. If it was being made, we weren't hearing it. So it was that desire to fill that gap and to create something both new and looking back to, which is where, and looking back at the darkness of the past, which is kind of where the title of that first album came from. Definitely, that was the goal. And my immediate goals really were to get an album out. That was my one focus. That was my big goal I wanted to do with the band. And when we did that, that was sort of like that box ticked, and everything else has been a bonus ever since.
Now, was the Seasonal CODE material written to be instrumental tracks, or did you envision vocals going over them?
Yeah, in those first 2 demos, definitely, purely because I am not a vocalist and I'm not a lyricist, and I think you need to be aware of your limitations in life, and that's something I've never been able to do. And I didn't have access or know any vocalists or lyricists who would be interested in doing it. So I ended up writing the only thing I could, which was instrumental music. And that started changing on the third demo when I actually got the vocalist from Reign of Erebus. We collaborated a bit, and he did some vocals on some of those demos, which actually sort of like turned a page really, because I did start to write with vocals in mind. And then when Code came along, obviously I had Matt involved, and from then on I've always written with space for vocals, and none of it was intended to be instrumental synth, so it was a necessity in those early days.
Now, was that a challenge to start writing with a vocalist in mind?
I kind of found it easier in a strange way, because you didn't have to fill every second of the music with something interesting, because you knew that the vocalist was going to be in there to pull the songs in different ways. And also it meant that what I was producing wasn't the final product. And so I could leave something which had music which could be taken in many different directions from a vocal perspective, and leave it up to the vocalist to do what he wanted with it and turn it into something new, which was, or something better than the original material was. So it's like a sum of its parts things, really. So I actually found it quite liberating, and meant that the through line of music didn't have to be finished when I completed the music side of things, because the vocals were going to take it into a world of its own.
Now, how do you see that seasonal Code material as it relates to Code's music? Do you see them as two separate projects, or is there still a link between the two?
I think they are two separate projects. I think the style of music changes very dramatically from the final seasonal Code demo to when Code started. All of a sudden things got a lot more with Code, I think a lot more refined, but also a lot blacker. And the seasonal Code demos were kind of like a melting pot of ideas and didn't really have much of a direction, I wouldn't say. They were just kind of meandering sort of atmospheric metal pieces, whereas Code had a purpose, and that it wasn't just a solo thing as well. It was definitely much more of a team effort. So I would definitely consider them as separate things. I think the only reason why we kept the band name type element was I think I was just kind of wedded to it, and it stuck. I'm kind of regretting it now, because it's such a commonly used word, and it can mean anything to anyone, and people can tag you by mistake and all that sort of thing in the world of social media. But yeah, at the time it seemed like a good idea.
So definitely in terms of search engine optimization, Code is a hard band to find.
It's a hard one, yeah, and that's why we partly, in all honesty, why we've tried to make the album titles as unique as possible, because we know that if people just type in Code, or if they type in Code band, they'll find us quite quickly, but typing in the word won't do anything for you. So we need to have something which is unique.
Is that what also led you to stylize your name with the tags?
I think that was just to try and make the band name more unique, so it wasn't just the word. I think or even back then we knew that it was quite, it's a common word, obviously, but no other metal band had used it to our knowledge. And to make it something more special rather than just that word, which is kind of a dull word in many ways, we did stylize it, and then the logo solidified that. Once we saw the logo with the stylized, brackets on the end, that was it, and there was no way we would change it. It was perfect for us, and it still is. I still love the logo and the way it looks.
going on 5 albums, you've been working with a full band, but you're still writing most of the material yourself, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm quite a bad collaborator, to be honest. I don't like when I'm writing bouncing ideas backs and forwards between people. I like to sit on my own and make my mistakes and try in private and try things which may or may not work and not be worried what anyone else might be thinking at any moment in time. And I've always sort of been quite insular in that way. So the way we work now is the same way we worked back in when we first started, which is I create demos from scratch, full music demos, bass, drums, guitars, but no vocals, and then hand that to the rest of the guys to put their own stamp on. And, you know, sometimes we might change some of the structures here and there, but more often than not, I've worked out how the song is going to be structured, and that's how it is. And there's not much changing of it, because by the time I got to that point, I spent so much time working out when the song should be done and what it needs and what it's lacking, that by the time it gets to the guys, by the time I'm ready to share it, I sort of refined it enough anyway. And more often than not, they're working at that point anyway, and they don't need changing.
Now, for you, do you start with a riff, or are things sometimes more ephemeral? Like, do you have a feeling or kind of an idea how you want a song to flow?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. More often than not, it's a riff. And usually it's something that appears by accident. I think probably 95% of the time it's guitar riff or a guitar part. And once I've got that, I work out whether that part is a chorus or a verse or a bridge or what, and work backwards or forwards from that. So, for example, on the new album, on the last song, The Mad White Hair, how I wrote that actually was I wrote that very small, radio box guitar part in the center first. I just came up with that while I was playing around with that particular guitar sound, and I liked it. And from that direction, I wrote forwards and backwards until the whole thing was completed. So that one started off as a really insignificant part of what the song was, but the feel of that inspired everything that came before it and afterwards. And I think the other end of that was the second song, Clemency and Atrophy. That started off because I really wanted something to have just a drum beat and the bass guitar with a groove and nothing else. And so I worked on that until that was right, and then built everything around that. So it's always a musical start. It's never anything too ethereal.
So the album that we're talking about is called Flyblown Prince.
Yes.
And it came out on June 4th through Dark Essence Records. Andrew, when did you actually start working on this album?
It's probably about 3 years ago, I would say. It takes a long time. It took me, and this one took a particularly long time. It took me about a year to write it, I would say, musically. And I think we really, really laboured on every single detail on this to make sure it was as perfect as it could be. So, for example, some songs have tens and tens of different layers and little subtle sounds in there, which needed to be made sure that they were working in the context of everything else, and there weren't any notes which were jarring in the wrong way. And also from a mix perspective, it was really important to make sure everything was heard, but not heard too much, if you know what I mean. So everything had a purpose. So it was definitely something which took an awful long time. It was about a year writing, another 3/4 of a year recording, another half a year mixing and everything. And yeah, before you know it, that's 3 years, I think.
So you're actually based in New Zealand right now, right?
Mm.
How did that affect the collaboration with you based in New Zealand, and I believe your bandmates are still in the UK?
Yeah, it was a very difficult one. I think this is one of those occasions where life gets in the way, and it was a personal reason for moving here, and I knew it was going to be difficult, and it was a really tough call to leave the guys behind. But we are still working really well, even despite the distance. So I make sure I go back to England when life is normal anyway, once or twice a year to either do some recording or some shows or something. So we keep that going. And of course we're in touch, daily anyway, all the time, because we're a close group of guys. So it does mean that we're not rehearsing as much as we were. We used to rehearse an awful lot. But what that does mean is that we put in the hard work so that when we do get together for a show or something like that, we only need one rehearsal or something like that, and we're back to where we were, because we're so used to playing with each other, and a lot of the back catalogue of songs we do play are so ingrained in us now that it doesn't take long to remember how to play them. So yeah, it's not ideal, but we're making it work.
Now, did you end up recording this yourself?
It varied. So the drums were recorded when I was back in England about a year and a half ago, and the idea was to record some more of it together as well. But COVID got in the way, so we ended up doing quite a lot of the rest of it remotely. So I recorded the guitars myself over here. The vocals were recorded in England, as were the bass, and then I brought the files over here and put it all together ready for the mix, which was then originally done in England before. Yeah, we had a couple of more goes at it to get it to where we wanted it to. So it's the drums were the one bit which was more of a collaborative effort, I would say, but everything else we were bouncing between each other remotely.
Now, is this the first time that you've put an album together remotely?
No, to be honest, we've done that more often than not. So the first album, we were all together locked away in a studio for 3 weeks doing that. But the second one, there was all sorts of, so that's Resplendent Grotesque, the second album. There was all sorts of, band lineup changes around that time. So the drums were done. I went in afterwards to do the mixing because all the guitars I'd recorded separately. Then we had to go away and do the vocals and then come back again and mix it again. So that was all done in different sessions too. And the third album was done in a similar way as well. I think the only two which were done in a studio in one go together would be the first album, Nouveau Gloaming, and the one before this, which was a much simpler album as well, which meant that we could go in there and do it in one go. I think if we'd have tried to do this album in the studio in one go, it'd have ended up costing us a fortune because there are so many guitar layers in there and so much detail that just tracking it would have been, prohibitively expensive with how much recording costs compared to what revenue is from sales these days. So you have to be sensible with the money you're given. And so we spent the money as best we could on drums and the mix and master and everything else that we can do ourselves based on the experience we've gathered. We did. So we're trying to be as efficient as possible. But bearing in mind, we spent a lot of time recording over the last 20 years ourselves in one way or another. So we know what to do to at least get something to that professional level.
Musically, how would you compare Flyblown Prince to the previous Code albums?
I think it's when I was writing it, it did feel to me more similar to Resplendent Grotesque than any of the other albums, I would say, and that's partly down to the type of guitar sound I was using and what the way that makes me play. So it's that kind of sharp but not too distorted sound. So everything is very, very audible, and that makes me play in a certain way. And it's kind of similar to what I did on the second one. I think it's not as concise as Resplendent Grotesque, and I think it's probably got a little bit of perhaps Nouveau Gloaming and a little bit of Organox in terms of the scope of it. I think the one album it's not close to, obviously, is the one before the Mutt album, which was a thing all of its own, really. But I think it's closest to Resplendent Grotesque out of all of them, but it's definitely not repeating that, I would say. You can't call them similar albums.
Flyblown Prince will be your first album for Dark Essence Records, right?
That's right, yes.
How did they get involved with this release? How did you end up getting in touch with them?
Well, we've been in touch with them for quite a long time, actually. So back in the Resplendent Grotesque days, we did one of their showcase festival type shows in Norway. So that was in, 2009 or something like that. And we've been in touch with them ever since. And when we came time to looking for a new label, they were a really clear choice for me to ask to see if they would be interested, because they are, quite a small label, but very professional and take great care of all the releases they put out, rather than just, having huge numbers of releases and not being able to pay attention to them as much as we would like. So for us, it's the perfect match. And yeah, they've been absolutely wonderful, and we're looking forward to continuing with them definitely.
You've also self-released albums through your own label, right?
Yeah, in the past, yes. Yeah. That's kind of more like a necessity, really. That started because when we did Resplendent Grotesque, that was before vinyl really took off as something which people were really, really interested in. But for us in the band, it was kind of essential. We all came from a background where, vinyl was really important, and I wanted it to be released. So I ended up starting the label to put out the vinyl version of that album, just because we wanted to take control of it ourselves, and the label were happy for us to do that. And then from then I ended up doing more releases of pieces of music which weren't massively commercially viable. So I would do that, and that labels weren't necessarily going to be too interested in. So I'd do small numbers of quite, niche packaging ideas, just small numbers. And so people who are interested in it could get hold of something physical, but we didn't need to go through the whole, trying to find a label for everything and getting turned down for doing a cassette release because it doesn't make financial sense, but we still wanted to do it. So it was that avenue to release things which labels generally wouldn't want to do, which is kind of different now because it's come around full circle, because now most labels are going to put out vinyl releases and cassette releases and tape releases of everything. So the need for that is kind of gone, which is why the label doesn't really exist anymore.
In your opinion, what is the purpose of a label in 2021?
I think as much as people would like to do things themselves, there are still financial aspects which most people are going to need help with. So it costs a lot of money to make an album. It costs a huge amount of money to press an album. And also the time taken to promote it is not insignificant. And I personally do not have time to write, record, and then try and promote music, without help. That's something I do not have time to do, and I don't have the skill to do and the connections to do. So that's what labels do for us. I guess that model might be changing at the moment, and people are starting to do things a little bit differently, a little bit more DIY. But life is too short, and I haven't got the time to do it. And the labels are, if you pick the right label, they're good at doing it. So yeah, it's the money, time, and experience.
Is there also an aspect to, for example, Dark Essence has, it's not a particularly big label, but it's got a niche of black metal bands and some very well-respected names. Is there also an aspect of, I'm not sure what the word is, but, being associated with the label and the acts on the label, you're in good company, so to speak?
Yeah, it's definitely important to be with a label that you respect and that you appreciate the other bands on the label. Yeah, because it, if anything, it shows that they're on the same wavelength musically and they're going to appreciate what you do. So that is important. And I think what I said earlier is increasingly important as well, that having a label that is putting out not too many releases, but is taking a lot of care over them and making sure that what they put out is aligned with how the label feels almost. And I think although the acts on the label are quite different, I don't think any of them stand out of place as something which just doesn't fit. So I think that is important, and also having a good relationship with the people on the label and knowing that the guys are going to do the right thing and stand by you is the important thing too.
So you mentioned with Code, your main goal was to record an album. At this point, you've got 5 albums and a few EPs out. What's left for you? What are your goals moving forward?
It's to keep making music as long as it's rewarding and as long as we believe in what we do. I think as soon as we start making music which isn't inspiring to us, or everything just ends up becoming too much hard work, and that the satisfaction that outweighs the amount of effort that goes into it, because there is a huge amount of effort that goes into making music. It's, you know, an album is something which occupies all of your, you know, so much of your brain power, and night and day you're constantly thinking about it. And from the second you write the first piece of music to having it finished is such a huge amount of work. So you have to get a lot of enjoyment out of it to want to keep doing it, because it's incredibly time consuming, but that reward is still there. And I think as long as we're producing music which we are rewarded by emotionally and that we're proud of, I think we'll keep doing it. It's this, and also, to be honest, after 20 years of doing it, it's almost become like a natural reaction to keep doing it. I think I don't know what I'd do with myself if I stopped. So yeah, it's kind of like an automatic response now. So I'll just keep on doing it.
So Flyblown Prince is out now through Dark Essence Records. Andrew, tell people how they can order the album. What's the best way to get this?
The 2 best ways are to either go on our Bandcamp site, so that's Code Black Metal on Bandcamp, and you can get the vinyl version or the CD or T-shirts or combinations thereof, or download it if you like. Also, the Dark Essence website is a good place to go. That's got links to where to grab the music from as well. And also, if you so wish, it's on iTunes and Spotify and all those platforms too. So my advice is to search for Flyblown Prince rather than Code, because it'd be a lot easier to find it.
So you talked about the importance of vinyl releases for Code. Do you want to tell me a little bit about the vinyl releases for this album? The vinyl versions that you guys put together for this?
Yeah, it was a difficult album because it's 44 minutes long, which is just on the edge of what will fit nicely on a single vinyl. And I'm not a fan of putting out double vinyls for the sake of it. I get really annoyed having to turn the disc over every 10 minutes just because it happens to be a double vinyl. I'd much rather make the most of that time we have rather than just pressing extra plastic for the sake of it. So the ordering of the album is very vinyl centric to make sure that it fits. So it's a single vinyl, but it's designed with an inch of its life to be as perfect as it can. I'll say that much. Also, similarly, because it's a single, it's a single sleeve rather than a gatefold, so no unnecessary waste there either. And there's 2 versions. You can either get the old-fashioned black vinyl, or there is a red black marbles swirl type thing, which is a really nice color combination, I think, and goes nicely with the cover. So there are your 2 options.
Yeah, I saw the limited edition color version, and it looks very cool. I don't know if it's going to be around when people hear this podcast, but people should definitely check it out.
Yeah, if I was going to pick one or the other, I'd definitely have the red and black swirl one. That looks nice.
And if people want to follow Code online and keep up to date with what you guys are doing, what's the best way to do that?
The 2 places we are most active on is Facebook. So Code Black Metal, facebook.com/Code Black Metal is our address there. That's the place where I try to make sure we're as up to date as possible. And we also have an Instagram site too, which again, I think is Code Black Metal, but you can find the link from Facebook there. We're trying to keep things as up to date there as possible. Also, we do have a YouTube site, which we got up to date recently, and I'm trying to make sure to keep posting sort of rare and unusual things in there that people might be interested in. So there's some demos and some audio of specific instruments from different albums if people are interested in that sort of thing, want to get into the details. So that's another place where I'll continue to add more material on there as well. So they're the 3 places.
Cool. What part of New Zealand are you currently in?
I'm living in Auckland.
Okay. So I got to visit New Zealand twice a couple of years back. Once I went to Auckland, once I went to Wellington. Auckland has I don't know if you've gotten a chance to to play shows there yet, but Auckland's got a pretty cool venue. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Do you know what I'm talking about?
There's a few. What size venue are you talking about?
It was very
Was it a
small,
small one?
and it was kind of in a basement.
Yeah, that'll be Whammy Bar.
That's it. Yeah. Have you gotten a chance
Yeah.
to play there?
I've watched a couple of bands there. Yeah, I've seen a few bands. The last one I saw there was At the Gates, actually, which was nice because Adrian from At the Gates played on our second album, and I haven't seen him in an awful long time, so it was really, really good to catch up with him again and see them play down there. So yeah, that kind of reminded me of, it's nice seeing him in a small venue like that. It reminded me of when I saw them first in London in, I think it was 93 or something like that, in a small venue, and it's kind of like a flashback in a way. Don't get to see them in places that small these days very often.
Yeah, I think the band that I saw at Whammy Bar was Impetuous Ritual. They're kind of like a
They're an Australian band, aren't they?
yeah, like a atmospheric Black Death kind of band.
Yeah, I've heard of them. Yes.
Yeah,
I haven't seen them, but yeah, that would be a good one.
yeah.
I actually think Wellington's got a good scene too. It's probably got a better music scene than Auckland has in many ways. They've got lots of good bands and lots of activity going on down there.
Yeah, when I was in Wellington, there's this little venue called Valhalla, and I say little just in the sense that it's not a big venue. I don't mean to disparage it at all, because it's actually a very cool venue. And they had a 3-day metal festival there, and I got to check out a lot of cool bands from the region, a lot of cool bands from New Zealand.
Yeah, the Whammy Bar gets lots of gigs. They do a really good job bringing bands in, and the same with Valhalla, and the same with Whammy Bar as well, because they might be small, but that's kind of the size that fits the country, if you see what I mean. That you're not going to get that many people in this country coming to see something too, extreme, really. So it fits the bill. There are bigger venues around, but you're not going to fill them with enough people if you're putting on something a bit more underground. So yeah, it fits the size.
I mean, I think people would be surprised by the size of venues that even a band like, you mentioned At the Gates. I saw Deicide and Obituary at venues that were, 200 people max. And I think that's the natural size for this kind of music. I don't know. I feel like metal needs to be in a very intimate space.
I think I agree. There's a lot to be said for the big outdoor festivals where you get to see every band under the sun in one go and there's thousands of people, but I get so much enjoyment out of going to those small gigs where it's much more personal, and it kind of reminds me of how it was when I first started listening to this kind of music, and it's nice to see that it hasn't changed in many ways. It's still the same. It's still upfront and personal. It's hot and sweaty, and yeah, and they're the gigs I like playing as well. There's really small ones where the people are close, and yeah, there's no hiding, and there's not 300 bands playing at the same time or coming on after you and all that sort of thing. That's how I prefer it too. I agree.
Now, how important is the live experience for you?
I think it's something we all really enjoy. So any chance we do, we can play live. We definitely go for it. I don't think we're not one of those bands where you have to see us live to experience what the band is about. So we're not kind of like a visceral band in that way. I think because of the detail and the subtlety in what we're doing, sometimes it gets lost playing live because of the volume and the mix and room sizes and all that kind of thing. So if I wanted to experience what Code is, I think an album is probably a better way of doing it. But seeing us live is a different thing. It's much rawer, I would say, because there's only 2 guitars. We haven't got all the extra layers and everything. So they're different things, but I don't think it's essential that you see us live to know what Code is about. It's kind of another side to the coin rather than an amplification of what we do.
Do you try to present your material in a different way when you play live, or do you try to stay to it as faithfully as it was on the recordings?
We try to be as faithful as we can, I think, and I think because we've always had quite a lot of layers in our music, we have to pick which guitar layers or lines we're playing, which will still put the sentiment of the music across without missing anything. There's a limit to what you can do with 2 guitars, but because sometimes there's 8, 9, 10, 11 different things going on the record, but we try to be really careful about which bits we choose to play. And also, I think the only other variation is that the songs that we play from our fourth album, which obviously was delivered in a very different style, was very underdriven and not really metal at all. But when we play those songs live, we keep the metal guitar sound and basically deliver them in a way which is similar to the rest of the material. And it's quite interesting to hear how they don't sound out of place. Actually, the ones we do pick, they still sound dark, and in that metal setting, they work in a different way. So it's nice to know that we can still put those songs in, and I will keep doing that.
Is trying to reproduce the layers in your music the hardest part of playing live?
I think by the time we've worked out what those parts are, it's really just a case of playing them. So that's not really the hardest part. I think generally the hardest part is, I guess, with a band our size, we don't tend to have, a sound engineer working with us. We work with whoever happens to be on the venue at the time, and they might not know us. So it's quite hard being able to hear clearly what we're playing in any given venue, because it varies from day to day, and sound check is what it is, but by the time you play, everything's always completely different anyway. So it's always the biggest challenge I always find is those first two songs where you try to work out what you're hearing and what to latch onto and where to roughly stand so you can hear things the best, because I'm half a foot here, half a foot there, and all of a sudden you can't hear what you're doing, or you can't hear what you're playing with. So I think it's those venue to venue struggles which I think probably most bands can relate to. That's our problem too.
Is there anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. I think it's been really enjoyable talking to you. Been excellent questions and really well thought out. So I do appreciate it. And thanks for people for taking the time to listen to this. I really appreciate it too. And we're very proud of our new album. So if you do get a chance to check it out, we'd really appreciate it. And yeah, we just hope you enjoy it.
Thanks so much, Andrew.
No problems.